Hello everybody, welcome to Spa-Francorchamps for the third and final race of the weekend for the Radical European Masters. It is Ben Evans and Will Brown with you to talk you through the action for this 50-minute race. And you join us, well, we were joking yesterday, there's two weathers, types of weather at Spa-Francorchamps. It's either raining or it's about to rain, and today it's the former. The cars are on the grid, and as you can see, we've got some last-minute tyre changes underway, not least not for Manhal Alos. He lines up in pole position, but the car alongside him on the front row of the grid, James Littlejohn, is having some wets fitted because, well, it's really quite warm, but it's been drizzling steadily now for the best part of 15 minutes.
Yeah, the air temperature's pretty warm, and there's been sunshine this morning, so I'd imagine there's some heat in the track as well. But yeah, sure enough, there's a little bit of drizzle, and as we've seen in the races earlier this morning with the TCR, that was definitely slippery over the other side of the circuit through Pouhon and down to Stavelot.
So Littlejohn getting some wet tyres fitted, and I guess that the conditions have just changed such that the gamble of slicks maybe is not going to work out. Their third on the grid is John Corbett. He and James Winslow enjoying an excellent race yesterday afternoon. Again, it looks like he is about to get some wet tyres bolted onto his Spider.
So really, I think this is going to be a race. If it dries out a bit, this is going to be all about the pit stops, and the onus is going to be on the pit crews, because I would expect to see some tyre changes in the middle of the race here.
Next up on the grid is Jeremy Ferguson. The car that he shares with Andrew Ferguson, and then the first of the SR3s, that is Marcello Maratiotto, in the car that he shares with Marco Cencetti. And as we're looking at the close-up of Maratiotto, can tell you there are mechanics sprinting with trolleys laden with tyres onto the grid. James Abbott, another driver, about to get some wets bolted on, and this is the last thing you want, just so you're readying yourself for the race. By the way, when we do get going, there are going to be 2 formation laps, but the second of those formation laps, the timing is going to start. Here is Jim Booth, and Jim, been really impressed by him this weekend. He's been getting the most out of the Spider and had 2 very good results.
Yeah, he's a stalwart of the Radical USA Cup, and joined us here in the European Masters at Estoril in his new RXC Spider, which looks fantastic in that 2-tone blue livery, doesn't it? There's another really strong contender for an SR3 win today. That's Riccardo Dona.
Thumbs up from Martin Verity as he awaits potentially a service on the grid as well. You can just see those spots forming on the helmet, but almost as this is going on, that the drizzle is actually less intense than it was just a couple of moments ago. Here is Brian Caldwell, and Brian being in the thick of the action all weekend, mainly actually doing battle with Martin Verity. Yeah, and
what a stellar weekend Verity's been having. Picked up 2 podiums in yesterday's 2 races, so long may that continue for today as well.
So I am... Well, this is going to be just fascinating. Everybody's going for wets at the moment, including Mark Crader, who we look at now. But when they do get waved away to start the race, if it stops drizzling, then those wets are going to overheat.
Interestingly, it looks actually like having lifted the wets off the trolley to fit onto James Abbott's car, they've actually elected now to stay on slick. So just shows you how quickly the conditions are changing.
Here's the grid then. Manhals and James Littlejohn on the front row, then John Corbett and Jeremy Ferguson, Marcello Maratiotto and James Abbott row 3, Jim Booth, Riccardo Dona on the 4th row, then Martin Verity and Brian Caldwell, Mark Crader and John Gandar rounding out the top 12. And on to Yanni Herpia, Alain Costa, Aaron Bailey, Konstantin Gurkayev, Faisal Bin Laden and John Caldwell, who completes the grid. And as you can see, the grid is buzzing with activity, and for a lot of these teams, they're running multiple cars in the race, working their way back down the grid. I suspect once they've finished changing the tyres of those at the back, the ones at the front will be waving to get their slicks back on.
Yeah, it's a classic Spa conundrum with the changeable weather, and of course one of the unique factors of Spa being such a long circuit is it can be bone dry in the pit lane and pouring it down with rain at the top half of the circuit. So the drivers are going to have to adapt very quickly. These 2 opening laps are going to be absolutely crucial just to gauge where the grip levels are.
Well, there is the unequivocal evidence that it's still a bit damp at the far end of the circuit, as those in the pit area just taking shelter. It is still, it's a very, very fine drizzle.
It's right on the tipping point, isn't it, where you'd risk it for a biscuit and go with slicks, but there's continuing dark cloud seems to be coming in from the Stavelot end of the circuit.
Well, you risked the weather forecast for a pint of Leffe and won. So, or was it champagne that they've offered you?
I think it was a pint, but yeah, that'll be well received on the journey home for sure.
We haven't got word yet as to when the countdown is going to start. The drivers have been informed it's a wet race, but of course the cars won't be waved off until all the works that need to be completed have been completed. But it looks like we're a few minutes away from the grid being clear. We've just got one car that certainly I can see it's still being worked on. That's Jean Gandart. Otherwise, tyres are being wheeled clear.
Now this, of course, is really going to play if there is any tricky conditions here. These are really going to play into the hands of James Littlejohn, who's starting there on the front row. As we've seen so many times, if the weather conditions are a little bit treacherous, a little bit slippery, he really revels in that with his historic Formula One experience. Although there could be a little bit of late drama there. Just checking, we're going to lift the engine cover off that car. It looks like are they looking to lift it?
Let's see. Everybody is being yeah, you're right. A little bit of work with Littlejohn. They're just, I think, checking the hoists on it, aren't they? Faster word to Littlejohn. It is the picture that you're watching, I should say, is making it look a little bit darker than it actually is. Possibly just where the clouds are in relation to this picture, and it's always so tricky to judge the weather here, and these are the worst possible conditions. I think if you were to say to the drivers, obviously they'd like it to be dry, but if it can't be dry, they'd like it to be unequivocally wet, because at least you've got a degree of consistency. It's where some of this track might be dry, other bits of it might be very wet, and other bits might be in between where it starts to get really hard. And
where the more experienced drivers are going to be able to make those wet tyres last a little bit longer in the dry conditions. And the Dunlop wet tyre is a really durable tyre. It can go a long way in these dry conditions, but ultimately it will start to slide around as the tread blocks overheat and the tread moves around. It's going to cost the drivers later on. So it's going to be really critical that these guys just are as economical as they can if it really starts to dry out, and try and make it to the pit stop so they don't have to stop twice.
Well, away we go on the formation laps. As I say, there are going to be 2 formation laps, but the clock's going to start with the second one, and that is a good point about the tyre durability. My gut feel is it will be a big ask if it does stop raining to make sure that the wet tyres last until the pit stops, because this is such a high-speed circuit with a lot of high-speed corners, and those wet tyres will disintegrate very quickly.
Yes, yeah. So, well, again, and then it plays back into the hands of the teams, because any stop outside of the normal pit window is completely unregulated in terms of timing. So then it will be really a race between the teams. Just see them scrolling through here. So we'll have 2 formation laps. The clock will start ticking after the first formation lap. This will just give the guys a little bit extra time to get some heat into those tyres. Of course, they'll be stone cold, pretty much having only had the 1 lap and then a long sit on the grid. So it'll give them an extra opportunity just to gauge the grip, which no doubt is variable across the circuit.
So let's have a look. I mean, down the Kemmel Straight, it's dry, isn't it? And you can already see as well the heat haze shimmering off the cars, which shows that any moisture is going to burn off in a matter of seconds. So now the question, although you can still see it's greasy because you've got those tyre treads, is if you were minded to say it's not going to rain much more in the immediate future, do you come in at the end of this first formation lap while they're behind the pace car still, change the tyres, and then start at the back of the queue?
Yeah, that's right. And then obviously you've got a real advantage over the full race distance as soon as we go green. But yeah, interesting times, and there's going to be a bit of nail biting on the pit lane. As really, it's all down to the communication between the teams and the drivers, I think.
Through the Bruxelles hairpin and on towards Pouhon, and you'd have to say here that along the Kemmel Straight, we saw those little, you could see that the tracer of where the wheels were running. Here, not at all. I suspect she's probably tuning into our web stream as the...
Now there's just a few spots of moisture on the camera here as they drop down.
And yes, and you can again see the wheel tracks into Pouhon.
Yeah, through Pouhon, that's right. And again, the reflection off the circuit here from the lights of the course car. Again, it does look like there's still a bit of moisture in the circuit there as they approach Stavelot and Fagnes.
Through Fagnes, and yeah, not looking too slippery there. I'm just going to have a little look of our window, see if anybody's readying themselves. Couldn't quite get the view. This is a tough call. I mean, I think of the drivers who would probably take the risk. You'd see James Abbott maybe, you see James Littlejohn maybe.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you've started on slicks, actually, I think you could be in the hot seat here if the weather certainly as long as it doesn't get any wetter than it is at the moment, and it is still continuing to drizzle, but it's not particularly heavy. This is just about at the point where you could probably, with enough traffic around the circuit and enough speed and heat in the tyres, be able to maintain the grip and a dry racing line.
They're weaving around, nonetheless getting some heat into their tyres. In terms of the air temperature, it's about 18 degrees today, but it's really muggy and humid. And therefore, the track will...
And again, you can see there's quite a lot of moisture there on the entry into the bus stop, isn't there?
Well, there's a bit of a gamble here, isn't it? Because where you've got the moisture, and that is... Yeah, the windscreen wipers are on the leading pace car. Nobody's ducking into the pits to change their tyre options, which means I think everybody would be of a consensus that it's sufficiently wet. And part of the challenge is the sections of the circuit where it doesn't seem to be that damp are not the heavy braking zones, whereas here into La Source it is certainly, for our poor cameraman, starting to rain a little bit more steadily. Our commentary position, by the way, is just overlooking the pits, and yes, it is now it's now a definitive shower rather than drizzle. So we are underway. The race clock has started ticking, even though we are behind the pace car. And the pace car will lead them around for the second formation lap, and then we will get underway. You can see the tyre tracks, and that was in the preceding TCR Benelux race, which it started to rain midway through, and unfortunately somebody got a little bit caught out on the way into Eau Rouge.
Yeah, and you're going to want to be able to. You're really not going to want to go off there. As you can see, there's quite a lot of fluid left on the runoff there, so that's not a place that we wanted to go at all during the course of this race.
And also the other factor is once it starts to rain a bit, the grass at the edge of the circuit becomes very, very slippery, because whilst obviously it's showering now, it was incredibly wet from about 6 until 7:30 this morning, and the safety car, or pace car rather, continues to lead them around. It's going to be a very interesting race when we do get going to see who's got the confidence, and this is potentially, again, placed into the hands of the Spiders. Great traction, that extra weight, and the straight line speed. We saw the Spider win race 2 yesterday with Colleen Noble and James Abbott. They may well fancy their chances again.
Yeah, anybody familiar with Radical's range, of course, will know that these open cockpit cars have very little in the way of driver aids. So aside from the paddle shift gear change, there's no traction control or ABS. So it's all reliant in the skill of the driver to deal with that situation. And of course, when it's like this, you've really got to rely and trust in the aero grip of these cars to keep the car where you need it to be.
As has been evident, I would suggest, from the first 5 minutes of this broadcast, I'm not a meteorologist. I can't even say it properly. But what I can tell you is that's a lot wetter at Pouhon this time round than it was on the last lap.
Even a little bit of spray being kicked up by those cars at the back. So, yeah, that is definitely wet, isn't it? I mean, this is Spa. This is every stereotypical. Everything that everybody ever knows about Spa. This is exactly what the weather's like. These changeable conditions. It's not consistent across the course, and it just plays into those drivers that are good at conserving their tyres and can manage the grip levels effectively.
Yeah, much as it's nice to be in the commentary box talking through this race, there's also part of me that would like to just have a cone of fruit and be sitting on the bank on the exit of Eau Rouge watching this one unfold, because I think it's going to be really quite something. They're now at the furthest extremity of the circuit towards Stavelot, and then beginning to bunch up behind the pace car. So although the race clock has started, the race in earnest itself will start in a couple of moments' time. And of course, the first challenge they've got to navigate is the La Source hairpin, which is a heavy braking point, is pretty tight, but I would suggest all the drivers are well sighted on the risks that corner poses, and therefore, touch wood, will be reasonably circumspect through there, at least to make sure that everybody gets the chance to have a good race. It's the bunch of field all bunch up. It's Alos and Little John on the front row, then John Corbett and Jeremy Ferguson on row 2. Row 3 is Marcello Maracchiotto and James Abbott. Let's see who is going to be leaving Spa with the biggest smile on their face. The third and final race of the weekend, the 6th race of the season in the Radical European Masters, about to get underway. Any moment now, they come through the bus stop chicane. We wait for the lights to change. And we had a reasonably long hold yesterday until they got to the start line. It's the same again today, but away we go now. And who's got the jump? Jeremy Ferguson quickly away, so is Maracchiotto. So the leaders run side by side into La Source for the first time. Alos takes it from Little John. Then it's Ferguson from Maracchiotto. James Abbott, it's John Corbett who has lost out a little bit. He has been shuffled back as the field plummet downhill towards Eau Rouge. And already Little John takes the advantage away from Alos. They've got Jeremy Ferguson staying with them. James Abbott moves up into 4th, and this is the first real test at Eau Rouge. Maracchiotto around the outside of James Abbott. Great move from Maracchiotto. Abbott possibly just finding his way with the grip, but they're all safely through the first test along the Kemble Straight.
Yeah, and you can see again it's considerably wetter here as that's Jeremy Ferguson there possibly eyeing up. Alos takes a look and holds his line, but yeah, fight all the way back. Look at that SR3 battle there behind Jim Booth as Costa also moves away to cover his line.
Alain Costa trying to side his way past. Ricardo Dona has elevated himself into 2nd place in the SR3s. That's alongside Brian Caldwell. Alain Costa looks to the inside of Jim Booth. Booth shuts the door. Ricardo Dona gets hung out to dry to the wide line. Abbott and Maracchiotto continue to run side by side, but Abbott just outbreaks himself into the Bruxelles hairpin. Easily done. It is so steeply downhill there. And they continue to run downhill, flicking through the left-hander with no name, and that then feeds them towards Pouon. 2 more left-handers. And on towards Fagna. And again, the rain has continued to fall steadily over the course of the last 3 or 4 minutes. And this is so tricky for the drivers, Will, because the track conditions changing each and every lap. You just got to rely on what the car's telling you. Yeah,
I think unfortunately we're going to see a few people diving in the pits on the end of this lap, aren't they? Because it's definitely wetter out there, and anybody on slicks is just going to be losing here. Look, again, you see just isn't the grip there for Abbott, unfortunately.
No, and that I think he's certainly on slicks, and that is the car moving around in places that it wouldn't normally be doing. I'll tell you who's really flying though, is Faisal Bin Laden. He moves to the inside of Martin Verity, and that's from the very back of the grid from the Saudi Arabian driver, and he is making excellent progress. Remarkable performance given that wet weather, I'd imagine, doesn't really affect the Radical Middle East Championship all that often.
No, they they'll openly admit that they don't get much opportunity to use those wet tyres, but he's having a great battle here with Martin Verity. Martin defending around the inside of Bonchimon. Holds on, no, loses the position to Faisal as he goes around the outside.
Great move, wasn't it, from Faisal Bin Laden as he takes the place. He's about to challenge Ricardo Dona. He thinks about being greedy and looking to the inside of Dona into the bus stop chicane. They're all bottled up as well behind Jim Booth as Verity runs side by side with Yanni Herpia. So they sprint their way through. Abbott is continuing on his way. John Corbett gets demoted by Alain Costa. The order for you after 1 racing lap is James Littlejohn leads, 2nd place Alos, 3rd Jeremy Ferguson, 4th Maracchiotto, 5th Alain Costa, 6th John Corbett. And then in the Supersport class, it's Maracchiotto from Brian Caldwell and Ricardo Dona. As Booth arrives into Eau Rouge. not unsurprisingly, takes a big bite of brake. The problem being, though, the road climbs uphill so steeply, if you do slow yourselves down too much, then it's going to really hurt you on the way down the Kemmel Straight.
Yeah, very, very costly. Really, just you lose all that momentum that you need for the long uphill drag to Lecoum. But yeah, again now look, Al Faisal pulled alongside Donor. He really looks like he's got that car set up. Can he haul it up in time and take the position? Not quite. Oh, he's still there, just about in contention there. Drops behind once more.
Donor is a tough nut to crack when it comes to overtaking, and he's just got the car moving a little bit more maybe than the green machine of Bin Laden. So they've still got Jim Booth as a little bit of, I wouldn't say a blocker, but Booth so quick in a straight line, struggling for traction a little bit through the turns, unlike our race leader James Littlejohn. He and Tony Wells, the championship leaders, and we're talking about with the success seconds, they would need a conflation of circumstances to really challenge for victory, but I think they've got those, particularly with Littlejohn enjoying the clear track in these early stages. Meanwhile, Brian Caldwell looks to challenge John Corbett and goes through. Great move from Brian Caldwell, who is his opening laps showing himself to be something of a rainmeister. He's off in pursuit of Alain Costa. He's running in a very solid 5th position. Meanwhile, Booth, Donor, Bin Laden, Verity all doing battle, and Bin Laden looks to the inside of Ricardo Donor. It's going to be boxed in by Jim Booth for the purposes of Stavilo, but I think Bin Laden's made it sticky. Looks to the inside of Booth as well, as they now begin the run towards Blanchimont, and we've got this gaggle of SR3s.
Yeah, Booth is very much the cork in the bottle up here, isn't he? As the superior cornering speed through the middle sector of those SR3s is just hampered by Booth's straight line prowess in the straights.
This is great. There's about 5 SR3s all squabbling for 3rd place on the Supersport podium. So they now fan themselves out into the bus stop chicane, and Bin Laden's going to have exactly the challenge over the course of the next lap that Donor's been facing for the couple preceding, which is he closes right up onto Booth going through the bus stop chicane, and then the Spider's just going to romp away on the route to La Source, and it gives Donor the chance to fight back.
Yeah, and this time he looks much closer. He's pulling alongside. It's going to be last of the late breakers, but Al Faisal looks like he's covered his line pretty well. Donor's there. Oh, that inch.
That was close,
yes,
wasn't it?
Yeah, very good. Great piece of driving there by the pair of them.
And Ricardo Donor as well, just squeezing the green machine out onto the grass.
I'm not sure that move's completely finished
curb,
yet, though, as we see them come down the hill. No, it's not.
It's far from complete, and Bin Laden goes back through. Well, that was tight as Donor just files in behind him. And then they swoop out of Radion along the Kemmel Straight. Abbott and Corbett both struggling a little bit. I think they've possibly gone the wrong way with tyres, but it's not quite as dark as it was a couple of moments ago, and it's not raining, and so the track could come to them in the next few minutes, but we're only 8 minutes away from the pit window opening, so any advantage that they're going to get of it becoming perfect conditions for slicks could well be capitalised on by some of those ahead of them. So Abbott looks to navigate the left-hander.
Once again, you can see the reflection of the headlights off the track surface there. There's definitely some moisture in the middle sector.
I think also, as Abbott just looks for the wet line on the Exeter pool, and that's where all the grip is going to be from the marbles from earlier in the weekend. That's why he was running wide. It wasn't a mistake. That was a quite deliberate positioning of the car from James Abbott. It means that he does get a little bit of ground over John Corbett. And again, he does the same at Fania, looking for where the grip is, and in the wet weather it's typically offline. But again, this is a track where you don't get all that many opportunities to test here, and therefore for these drivers, many of them it's going to be their first time at Spa in the wet. Oh, and that's a problem for Jim Booth, who has had a moment, is looking to get the car restarted. Hopefully he'll be able to, because otherwise we could potentially be looking at the safety car bunching everybody back up once more. But it seems to have really started to click for James Abbott over the course of this last lap, and he's got into a rhythm and is now starting to come back at Brian Caldwell.
Yeah, you can see the gap is appreciably closer than it was previously, and a bit of a slide there under the braking though, so he's still got to be careful, as you can see, locking up there and runs wide. It has to take a shortcut across the rumble strips.
That's what's known as curse of the commentator.
I'll keep my mouth closed now.
Amply demonstrate. I'm the guilty party, as Abbott in 7th position, off in pursuit of Brian Caldwell. James Littlejohn remains our race leader. 2nd place is Matt Hallos. 3rd is Jeremy Ferguson. Littlejohn's lead over Hallos, by the way, 14 seconds. Ferguson a further 6 seconds back. Then it's 5 seconds back to the 4th place man, Marcello Marottiotto. Alan Costa is in 5th. And then it's 8 seconds back to this scrap between Brian Caldwell and James Abbott.
And you saw there Abbott just backing off to give himself some breathing space through Eau Rouge, because he knew he had the straight line legs up Kemmel here.
Yeah, there's nothing to be gained by doing something unnecessarily brave that's potentially going to end up with you into the barriers. Caldwell gets demoted. There's still the battle going on behind between Bin Laden and Ricardo Dona. That is for the final spot on the Supersport podium. Here's the 3rd place car of Jeremy Ferguson. Ferguson has got Marottiotto in the background behind him. Ferguson already some 20 seconds adrift of the race leader James Littlejohn. We've got Jim Booth blocking the pit lane entry, but at least he's got that car recovered and back to the pits, which is the most important thing. He will need to be moved within the next 5 minutes or so before the pit window opens and we begin to see the race starting to change its complexion a little bit. Well, Jeremy Ferguson so unlucky not to win the first race yesterday, but some of the Spider drivers are a little bit caught out by the fuel consumption on those cars. We just had a wave yellow flag over at Stavelot, just trying to work out who has gone missing. Also got Mark Crader in a spot of bother as well.
Yeah, and he was on the back of that train of SR3s, so yeah, it's a real shame to have seen him drop out of contention.
So Littlejohn heads off into his 6th lap of the race, runs downhill towards Eau Rouge, and Littlejohn, with his sort of parallel career as being one of the go-to historic Formula 1 aces, is very used to driving cars which are big on power, low on grip, and therefore that is perfect training for these conditions.
Yeah, with an SR8, you've really got to be on top of handling the mechanical grip in these conditions, and he'll be reveling it, as we've seen so many times. Oh, a big slide there! Look at that! But he's really got just moving it around on the throttle a little bit, just to. I think actually that's not necessarily doing any damage to his tyres there, because he's not having to put quite so much steering input onto the front. So that's not necessarily the daftest manoeuvre.
2nd place for Manhal Alos is now the best part of 20 seconds adrift of Littlejohn and is circulating 4 seconds laps slower. But nonetheless, for Alos and Kapadia, another solid finish for them will suit them very nicely.
Yeah, bearing in mind that they're carrying an extra 15 seconds of success sort of time over in the pit stops over the drivers in front of him. So just see a replay here of this manoeuvre. You could have put a sheet of paper between Corbett and Dona there.
Especially if you wanted that sheet of paper shredded, because that was very, very tight. And John Corbett, after the experience of Estoril, I think will have had his heart leap into his mouth when he saw an SR3 pulling alongside him, coming onto a straight. But it's a similar situation to a few moments ago with Jim Booth, which is that you've got the Spider being a little bit of a cork in the bottle for some of the super sports through the corners. And John Corbett, obviously he's racing these cars for position in the race overall, though they're in different classes, and he's got absolutely no desire to make this easy for Ricardo Dona. Dona looks around the outside of the Bruxelles hairpin. Beautifully executed move that by Ricardo Dona.
Yeah, now Faisal's looking to do the same now. Again, jigs to the inside. Is he going to get the run into P1? No, he's not.
He isn't, and that is bringing Aaron Bailey into the mix. Martin Verity's still there. Yanni Herpia's just started to slip back a little bit, but the track appreciably drier now than it was a few moments ago. Here is Brian Caldwell, 7th overall, 2nd in the Supersport class. And he will be enjoying this, running in splendid isolation. He's also the Supersport class and indeed the overall race Fangio class leader at the moment. As Faisal looks to the inside of John Corbett, there was a car's width. There remains just about a car's width. That disappears on the way into Stavelot, and now Corbett should romp clear on the run towards Blanchimont.
Yeah, Faisal's been pretty good at placing his car and really leaving the driver he's trying to overtake with little opportunity to move back over. So he's pretty good at making his line, but look at the amount of time he's lost there on the straight line advantage of the Spider.
And he's just struck. Yeah, I mean, this is always the challenge. And then he's got Martin Verity and Aaron Bailey behind him, both of whom are looking very racy, particularly Verity, who squeezes to the inside of Bailey. Gets the 25 car stopped in time at the bus stop chicane. Yanni Herpia has decided once more that it all looks like fun and continues. The next time they come past the start and finish line, they will see that the pit open board has been extended, and that means that we will start to get into the mid-race pit stop cycle as Aaron Bailey tries a little bit too hard into the Source hairpin, spins around. Well, Nigel Mansell did that at the start of the 1990 Belgian Grand Prix, so he's in good company for drivers in red cars having a rotation at the Source.
And again, you see a little twitch there from James, so the conditions aren't really improving. You see a replay here of caught out on the entry into, just locked up the rears, and it's so easy to do in these conditions if your brake balance isn't just spot on.
It's a replay of James Littlejohn, our race leader. Still pushing very hard, sliding the car. It suggests that he knows there's maybe a differential between what the aerodynamic grip is doing for him and what the mechanical grip is letting him get away with too. We've got a yellow flag somewhere out on track. We'll look to tell you where that is momentarily. What we have got though is the driver change now on as Abbott looks to the inside of Costa. That's going to be tight into Fania. They give each other racing room. Really nice driving from both of them. Alain Costa defends his place well. The pit window is open, but they've got to go past that board before they can come in. So we're not going to see anybody making their pit stop for the best part of 3 more minutes. And they have caught up to Jeremy Ferguson. And what this is suggesting to me, Will, is that those that risk the slicks, like James Abbott, it's now perfect territory for the slick tyres.
Yeah, look at the exit he got out of Stavelot there. He's definitely got the driving, can pass both. Easy manoeuvre on Ferguson there.
Yeah, so it now is going to come down to the pits. We know that Abbott and Noble won't need to change tyres. We know that a lot of the others will need to change tyres, and so that's going to add to the length of their pit stop. It also, for particularly James Littlejohn, being the pro driver in that car, does he duck in at the earliest opportunity to hand over to Tony Wells and put Wells onto some slick tyres, or does he see what he can do on the wets for a few more laps?
Yeah, I would. It's going to cost him notwithstanding you're pitting and out. There's 23 seconds in the pit loop here, and then possibly another, and that's Costa again having to fight. That's demoted Ferguson once, a place further. Ferguson now down to 5th position.
And Jeremy Ferguson at one point was about 8 seconds clear of this scrap. Now that last lap from James Abbott, he passed Alain Costa in the middle sector. He set the 2 fastest sectors of the race in sectors 1 and 2 on that last lap, and Abbott is now showing that slicks are the way to go. Oh, I love races like this with the changeable weather, with a tactical dimension. Just wonder if Alain Costa's also on slick tyres.
Yeah, you would certainly suggest with his elevation of pace now. So just as you say, it's looking appreciably lighter actually now in the pit lane. Looking outside of our commentary box, it's certainly the drizzle's abated somewhat and the sky is brighter. So this is going to be interesting. I think we might see a few maybe teams even possibly delaying in the pit stop, waiting to see what the driver's feedback is before they go for the tyres. And there might even be some inspection as well. I think they'll be looking at those wet tyres in the pit stop and then deciding whether or not to change them perhaps.
Yeah, just It's not quite as dark as it was a few moments ago. There's certainly the gamble.
And the other thing to consider here as well is that anybody who's on wet tyres with an SR3 is going to be able to go a lot further than the same tyres in an SR8. So we could even see here a bit of a surprise from some of the SR3 races later in the race.
I remember a British, and Jeremy Ferguson gets trouble. That suggests the tread is moving around as well quite a bit on his wet tyres.
Yeah, and he's just about to be caught by Brian Caldwell there.
There was a wet
Maritiotto even.
Wet dry British Formula 3 races. Maritiotto looks to the inside of Ferguson and goes through a few years ago, which I believe Scott Pye won, and that was nursing wet tyres on a drying track. He knew basically how much time he could concede, and I'm sure that for Marco Cincetti there's maybe a similar calculation going on when he takes over from Maritiotto. Could they snatch the victory? Well, that would be quite something.
Yeah, I mean they're carrying there'll be 80 seconds stationary in the pit lane, so they are 30 seconds over the absolute minimum. But then if you consider the guys in front, Littlejohn and Wells, so they're on 70 seconds stationary. Alos and Capardi on 95, so they're in pretty good company. Yeah, that could be a surprise, and particularly when you consider how fast Cincetti was through the middle section qualifying.
James Abbott has just set the fast lap of the race at 2 minutes 35.3, so those slick tyres are now 4 seconds a lap quicker than Littlejohn on the wets. Interestingly though, Maritiotto staying out. Into the pit lane has come Alain Costa. Hand over to Johan Scheer. Also in is Jeremy Ferguson to hand over as well. Fuel is going to go in now. What are they going to do with a tyre change? We'll find out after.
The slightest splash of fuel there, of course, that's one of the good things for the SR8s with weather conditions and the slightly longer lap times, that they will be conserving fuel.
Meanwhile, here is our race leader, and that is James Littlejohn. Littlejohn, I expect he's going to stay out reasonably deep. Now, his lead over James Abbott, despite Abbott's pace, is 42.9 seconds. Obviously, success seconds come into it. 4 seconds a lap, though. That's the sound of cogitation.
It's not untenable, is it? I mean, Noble's pace yesterday was certainly more than the match for Wells, so yeah, I think they've got as good a chance as any here.
I was just working through the maths of is it worth their while to put slicks on, or do they take the gamble and stay on the wets and hope that Wells can nurse the advantage through to the line.
Yeah, so Littlejohn and Wells will be stationary for 70, Abbott and Noble Jr. for 85. So that, of course, is going to make a big difference as well.
Across the line for Littlejohn, a 2 minutes 40.7. James Abbott was 1.5 seconds quicker than James Littlejohn just through the first sector. He was a further second quicker than Littlejohn through the middle sector. Alos, of course, is in the middle of this. He's got Alex Capardia to pass over to as well. I think we could be seeing, and actually into the pit lane now comes Manhal Alos. Now, what are the team going to do with regards to putting a new set of boots on the car? Rolls to a halt, and that, yes, they have got the fuel going in. Doesn't look like going to be changing tyres, does it?
No, so there's certainly no airlines ready, so it looks like they're doing the distance on those tyres.
What we can't see from that picture is whether or not it's wets or slicks. My inclination is that it's probably wets, given the pace from Alos earlier on, and given how much James Abbott was slipping and sliding in those early stages. Also into pit lane now comes Marcello Maritiotto. And again, Cincetti is waiting.
Well, a little bit of a delay there. Got a bit stuck with the radio cable. That's just cost him a few seconds in the pit stop there.
Hope they remember to take the phone off the wheel arch as well before he goes out. Now, we certainly saw Littlejohn putting wet tyres on the grid, so we know that Littlejohn's on wets. We can surmise that they are going to start feeling a little bit worn out fairly quickly.
Yeah, you can listen. If you listen to the engine note there, he's...
No, it's starting to rain again, would you believe? Looking out of the commentary box, so we are above the pit lane, and having had that window when slicks was the way to go, it's starting to drizzle once more right at the tail end of the pit window, which would explain why some of the teams have decided to stick to their guns and keep the wet tyres on the car. It means that sensational series of laps from James Abbott possibly about to come to an end. Little John has got time for one more lap before he passes over to Tony Wells, and that's exactly what he's going to do, and he's really pushing hard. And he will be, I would suggest, really quite relieved to see the precipitation into La Source. The car starts moving around, and not only is it raining, it's making the track immediately glisten with moisture on the surface, certainly at this very highest point of the track up at La Source. As Cianchetti emerges from the pits through Eau Rouge. Oh, that car is moving an awful lot underneath James Littlejohn.
Problem is they're not going to feel like new wets would feel now, even though the surface is getting wetter, having spent a good a good 6 or 7 laps in what really were dry weather conditions. It's that's not going to feel ideal at all for when he hands over to Wells. And
the pace on track dropped by 3 seconds on that last lap as well, so it slipped from a 2:40 for Little John to a 2:43 for James Abbott. He gave away 6 seconds, a 2:36 to a 2:42. But you're right, Little John, the way that he was pushing a couple of moments ago suggested that almost he had made the decision that he was just going to destroy those wet tyres and then move for slicks in the pits. And this is going to be, I would suggest, a whole heap of no fun at all for Tony Wells, because the way the car's moving around would suggest that there isn't much tread left in those tyres.
The car's slowing on the way into...
looks like the car of Andrew Ferguson. Indeed it is.
Oh, that's a real shame. They were looking good earlier in the race, but sort of progressively slipped back after the pit stops down to 13th. But yeah, this is going to be interesting, and depending on where Capadia peels back into this, once the timing screens sort themselves out, into 5th position, we'll just wait to see where they cross the line. I guess this could be ideal for them.
Yeah, the advantage that Little John had over Alos was about 20 seconds. Plus there is the success seconds to bear in mind. I just wonder whether or not they're going to have to put a new set of wet tyres onto that car. It is moving around so much.
That'd be interesting. I mean, that's unprecedented. I mean, I can't ever remember a time when we've had this occur before, where somebody's had to switch from one set of wets to another.
Brian Caldwell has continued to have a very, very solid race. He has, of course, had his pit stop like so many, and Little John has to come in this time. He seesaws at the wheel, carries as much speed into the pit lane as possible, and then gets on the brakes down to the 60 kilometres per hour pit lane speed limit. And it's quite a compact pit lane here at Spa-Francorchamps as well.
Yeah, not a lot of manoeuvring. It's not particularly wide, so a good getaway is absolutely critical. And we saw, despite them winning yesterday, there was a few seconds lost by the work spider of Abbott and Noble yesterday, as they tried to find a clear space to stop in the pit box.
Well, in and out has gone the fuel. Here is Capadia, so he's racing the car that's static in the pit lane. He's got Johan Scheer behind him, and Capadia's pace relative to Scheer we don't know, because Johan... Well, we think that Johan is on slick tyres, and that last lap from Johan Scheer being a 2 minutes 47 would probably bear that out. But again, there is the opportunity for it to stop raining, as it, I think, has done.
Yeah, now Abbott's just dived into the pits to hand over to Noble, so they, of course, their last lap there in the in-lap was a 2:42 again, so it's right on the cusp, isn't it?
It is, and as we were saying, because it's so warm, the second it stops raining, there's a lap of transition, and then it plays into the hands of those on slick tyres. And for my money, and this is pure speculation, we didn't see that Tony Wells was getting a new set of wet tyres. If it starts to dry out again, those tyres are absolutely cooked, and he's going to have to think about ducking into the pit lane. I don't think it's going to be quite the case for Alex Kapadia. Manhalalos was very steady during his stint, wasn't pushing so we could see quite as hard, and certainly the car wasn't moving around quite as much. Well, Wells emerges now. He's got a very healthy advantage at the front of the field. So here is our effective race leader, Tony Wells. He takes absolutely no chances through Eau Rouge first time around. And if you think back yesterday in the Formula V8 3.5, Matej Sakian managed to crash at Eau Rouge in his installation lap coming out of the pits because it's such an unforgiving corner on cold tyres, and that is exactly what Tony Wells is going to be finding on this first lap. But he's got the advantage of something like a 43-second lead over Colleen Noble. So again, unless everything really goes away from Wells here, he's...
Again, he's taking absolutely no chances, is he, on his out lap? Just bringing those tyres back in as careful as he can.
Brian Caldwell and Marco Ciancetti busy doing battle, and this is for the lead of the Supersport class.
Yeah, not a bad outlap there from Ciancetti, 45 straight away. So he in qualifying yesterday, he was the fastest driver of all through the middle sector, which is the one that really favours the SR3s. And yeah, this he could get a surprising result here. I would imagine he's going to struggle to overthrow Shear, but depending on where Herpier and Noble sort of come into the mix, this is going to be interesting as the race reaches its conclusion.
Well, Noble and Herpier only out of the pits now, so it's going to be the end of this next lap that we find the order. We've got Yanni Herpier in trouble already for his pit stop time.
Yeah, and having elevated to third position, it would suggest that something isn't quite as it should be there. But
we've got 15 minutes to go. We are on the 12th lap of this concluding race of the weekend for the Untitled European Masters. We will give you the full rundown of the classification at the end of this lap, but our anticipation is that Tony Wells is going to be the race leader, and he's going to be the race leader by quite a considerable margin, the championship leader alongside James Littlejohn. And again, if it stays as it is, 2 podiums this weekend for them, including a race win, is exactly what they'd have wanted. The Radical European Masters next in action, of course, in a fortnight's time at the Paul Ricard circuit. We will be again bringing you live coverage of all 3 races. Here is Wells across the line, and Tony's lead, yeah, we think over Alex Kapadia by the best part of a minute. So this is a very, very comfortable position for Tony Wells to be able to manage. And even now, he could afford to, between now and the flag, give away the best part of 10 seconds a lap and still come through and take victory. And therefore, he can drive well within himself, well within the capabilities of the car, and just make sure that everything is calmly managed.
Yeah, and it's going to have to be with the condition changing minute by minute here. Yeah, the last thing he needs is to be all out of tread if there is another short rain shower.
Yeah, it stopped raining up at the source. It was wet through Eau Rouge. It's still a little bit damp into Les Combes. And Tony getting on the brakes very, very early, taking absolutely no chances and putting no more load through those tyres than he needs to either.
Yeah, so Capadi's just come through at a 51-second deficit to Wells. There's Shear in third position, so he's 9.2 seconds behind. He's not far behind either. And then Ciancetti, 4th overall.
And Ciancetti is only 4 seconds back from Shear, isn't he? So he's going to be on to Johan Shear by the end of this lap. Here is Colleen Noble, who has just picked up a stop-and-go penalty for refuelling infringement. And therefore, even if the track conditions were to change markedly in favour of the slick-shod Spider, it would be to no avail, as Noble heads downhill into Eau Rouge, takes a big bite of curb as well.
Yeah, a lot of confidence there, isn't there, in the grip of the car. He's a very, very impressive debut for the young Scottish driver here in the RXC Spider. No real testing time in that car before he came to Spa, and has got straight on terms with it.
As Noble, who we'll be seeing a little bit later on today in the International GT Open race, navigates the chicane at Les Combes, giving the white lines at the edge of the circuit a very wide berth. The car moving around all the time underneath him. Well, you know, we said that Tony Wells could afford to lose 10 seconds a lap. That's pretty much what he lost to Alex Kapadia last time around, and this is not done and dusted just yet. Wells gave away 2 seconds to Kapadia through the first sector. Here is Brian Caldwell. And Caldwell leading the Fangio Trophy, second place in the Supersport class, having an absolutely super performance. Quite how he's going to be able to carry the trophy back on his Harley Davidson later, we'll find out. So look for somebody with an irregularly shaped rucksack on the E25 back to Calais this evening. Yeah,
that was a 250 by Wells there versus a 243 from Kapadia on the last lap. Real mover at the moment is Cenchetti though, 242, so he's faster than the 3 bigger chassis cars in front of him.
And I'm expecting by the time we see Cenchetti come past us that he has found a way past Johan Scheer. That is, we'd be thinking, no, I don't think so, because as the track has dried, there is Scheer, and so Scheer will have been able to elevate his pace over the course of this last lap. Kapadia has come past now, 2:43.5. He's 43.9 seconds back from Tony Wells with 10 minutes left on the clock. Here is the fight for third place between Johan Scheer, who elevates his pace to a 2:44.5. Again, we believe that SR8 is on slick tyres. Marco Cenchetti at 2:42.1. Wouldn't be unsurprised if that SR3 is on slicks as well. Maracciotto and Cenchetti car. But you never know with Cenchetti, because he always seems to pull pretty magnificent performances out of the hat, almost at will.
Yeah, I remember his quite spectacular debut with Andrea Fausti in an SR3 run by the UK Monza Garage team back here in 2010, and it was nothing short of startling really. And he was a performance very similar to today, right up there amongst the SR8s. And yeah, he's about the quickest guy out there in SR3 at the moment.
Now that would suggest that he is on wets, because he moves right to the inside of the road to try and cool the tyres down, and gets back onto terms with Johan Scheer, not least because it looks like it's drizzling a little bit at Les Combes as well. And this is always the challenge here, because Les Combes is about 2.5–3 kilometres away from the start and finish straight. So the shower that blew past us 5 minutes ago is now out to the furthest reaches of the circuit. Which is why we are seeing these fluctuations in times. They're coming up onto terms with Jean Gandard to put a lap onto him. Cenchetti closing up onto Johan Scheer. It's through this middle sector of the lap, of course, where Cenchetti is so good. He was the fastest of anybody in the race through this middle sector last time around. And he might fancy a little bit of a nibble to the inside of Johan Scheer en route to Fagnes.
Takes a look, not quite close enough, but he is noticeably closer this lap as Gandar moves right offline to let that pair through.
Good drive from Jean Gandar. Didn't want to get himself embroiled in any unnecessariness. Now, Tony Wells has just gone past us in a 2:48.0. Alex Kapadia is already 7 seconds quicker than Wells over the course of the lap so far, as Johan Scheer can't break away from Cenchetti on the run towards Blanchimont. Scheer consults his mirrors, looks to see where Cenchetti is poised on the track.
And this is where that balance and the lightweight of the SR3 is going to pay dividends, because of course it'll go so much further on the wet tyre than the SR8. And sure enough, looks to the inside, running really, really deep. Can he hold it up in time? Looks like he's got the place covered, yeah, for the switch around. Great manoeuvre there by Cenchetti.
Lovely pass from Marco Cenchetti. He moves into third position as the skies darken once more. Now, Kapadia was 8 seconds quicker than Wells last time. He's 36.1 seconds back, and I know that sounds like an awful lot, but at 8 seconds a lap, he's going to be either a lap away from catching Tony Wells at the flag, or, as we have another look at the move, or he is going to be right on him. It's going to be very, very close.
Yeah, and there might even be slight. I mean, the problem he's got, of course, is that he can't really adjust his pace if it's to with one lap. Tony Wells can't really adjust his pace to try and take the flag a lap earlier and just count down the minutes. He can't afford to that. He's going to have to push.
Here is Alex Kapadia, and Alex will, I'm sure, have been appraised by the team that the win could be on. And he and Alos, they've already scored one race victory this weekend. They would quite like another, because it would help their championship chances. They've got Ivan Lukasevich, I think it was, who they're about to come up and put the lap onto. Lukasevich, one of the stars of yesterday's action. Russian driver making his debut in the Radical European Masters, currently in 14th position. The Supersport class is headed by Chen Chetty from Caldwell and Yanni Herpia. Should inform you. Colleen Noble hasn't yet come in for a stop-and-go penalty. And already it's a further big bite. Now it's down to 33 seconds after just the first sector of this lap, but it's all the while the clock is ticking down, and Kapadia a further 4.3 seconds quicker than Tony Wells through the middle sector.
Yeah, just looking at now at the way that Kapadia is driving that car, I think he's been given the hurry up by the team. I think he's well aware of what's capable of happening. You can see that the car's moving around, and he is pushing a lot harder this lap now.
But at the pace at which Tony Wells is running, he has just started his penultimate lap, and that being so, Wells, I think, is going to have just enough in reserve. It's going to be a lot closer than perhaps we would have anticipated as Wells negotiates Eau Rouge. We're awaiting Alex Kapadia, who flashes past now, and Kapadia, that last lap was a 2 minutes 39.6, his best lap of the race, 28.4 seconds. It was a further 8.5 seconds cleaved out of Wells, and at that rate of capture, he needs, really, Kapadia needs another 3 laps, including the one they're on, to make this interesting. If Wells can manage the time on this lap and make sure that he goes into the last lap of the race next time around, then I think he is home and dry.
Yeah, it's only going to take a mistake by Wells, though, isn't it? Particularly as you say, it's getting darker again a little bit. There's still some drizzle in the air, particularly here in the pit lane.
It's one of the great things about Spa-Francorchamps circuit is it's a track that in these conditions is quite haunting, really, because you're in the very deep, dense forest, and you've got this ribbon of tarmac threading its way through it. It starts to become a really quite ominous and challenging circuit. So look at Chen Chetty, full of concentration. Manhal Alos earlier in the race. Not sure I'd have gone with the tinted visor today.
I'm not sure if I would have gone for that visor in these conditions, as you say, with it being so densely wooded around the circuit. It's really quite dark. There's, it has the effect of sort of cutting out the sunlight around the circuit. There's not much reflection. It's a real challenge, and one that commands a lot of respect. But it's always been a popular round for races, I think, for that reason.
For Wells, he needs to cross line with 2 minutes 47 left on the clock in order to trigger the final lap of the race.
It's going to be touch and go at the moment with the Untitled Chapter on.
It is, isn't it? Because if I were the Nielsen team, I might just be getting on the radio to Tony saying, back it off, just make sure this lap becomes the last one, because if he doesn't have a slow run through the bus stop chicane, it's going to be 2 more laps, and suddenly that swings a bit more in favour of Kapadia, although Kapadia's not had such a good lap on this occasion. I think he's probably got tangled up with Lukasevich. So cross line goes Tony Wells, and he now starts the penultimate lap of the race, unless he really does back off the clock. And he's got the luxury here, Wells, if the team can communicate to him, if he backs off by about 8 seconds, then this will be the last lap.
Yeah, that's right. And likewise, or he can even lose another sort of 3 or 4 seconds in the lap after that, and then absolutely know it for sure. But it's 10 times for the Nielsen Racing crew.
Capadia's through. Only on that occasion he was only 5 seconds quicker, but as I say, I think he was putting the lap on Lukasevic. So 23.8 seconds, 2 laps to do it in. If Capadia had been, if he got that down to 20 seconds with 2 laps to go, it might just have been on. As it is,
interestingly, all the while though, that's a 2:38 from Cenchetti, so he's now closed the gap to 9.2 seconds from Capadia.
and again, Cenchetti, if it were 3 more laps, would be on to Tony Wells. But that's the luxury of having inherited a sizable advantage. You can dictate the pace and run things as you want. Of course, Wells is now caught a little bit because it's very easy for us to sit here and say, well, what he should do is back off by 7 seconds. If he does that, it will feel like an absolute eternity out on track.
Yeah,
and it's very difficult to judge. And secondly, you lose your concentration.
It's surprisingly difficult to lose that amount of time in a single lap, because you try and brake later, but short of stopping almost stationary and then going again, it's really difficult to just work out exactly sector per sector how much you need to find.
Well, if you're driving on the motorway, if you're doing a mile at 70 miles an hour and a mile at 60 miles an hour, there's only about 6 seconds difference in how long it takes you to do it. But I wouldn't suggest try it, but you feel like you're going so slowly doing that mile at 60 miles an hour, but really it's only a couple of seconds slower.
Yeah, and in these conditions, they're looking really to lose. He needs to lose 20% of 20% of a minute's pace. 20% over. That's a massive amount.
It is, and with 50 seconds remaining, he is, I think, going to be starting his final lap of the race on this occasion. Although
sector time was pretty good. The first intermediate, he only lost just 1.5 seconds, and although there's another 4 seconds there gone in the middle sector.
Meanwhile, Colleen Noble has been summoned to see the stewards immediately after the end of the race because he has clearly taken the view that a stop-and-go penalty is a discretionary activity and has exercised the discretion not to serve it. Out the final turn comes Tony Wells, and across the line he comes. This is to start the final lap of the race. The time that he has given away to Alex Capadia on this last lap is substantial. The time that he's going to... Marco Cenchetti was almost 10 seconds quicker than Tony Wells through the middle sector alone on that last lap. As Capadia comes through, and Capadia 7 seconds up on Wells, he's going to be within 7 seconds of Tony at the end of this, the final lap of the race. Cenchetti 9 seconds quicker than Wells, so he's going to be not too far adrift either. If this were an hour's race instead of 50 minutes, well, we'd be looking at a very different result.
Well, I think just if you imagine if the weather had been a little bit heavier at the beginning of the race, and the guys in the SR3s on wets could have made even greater inroads into the SR8s and the Spiders, then I don't think it's inconceivable that we might have even seen those guys on the top step of the podium.
But motorsport is about what did happen, not necessarily what could have happened, as we have a problem, and around we go. Well held-ish, John Caldwell. That could have been a lot nastier than it turned out to be. You don't want to be clattering into an unguarded Armco rail. Wells just picking his way through very carefully. But you can see again the beginnings of a dry line already starting to open up on the far side of the circuit. So as it's threatening a shower up at the start and finish area, where it was raining a few laps ago, is now dry.
Yeah, and as I said, this is classic Spa conditions, and we've had a real mishmash across the weekend with bone dry and really quite high temperatures yesterday and great sunshine, and then returning to this classic changeable weather we've seen so many times at Spa for another thrilling final race.
Don't forget to join us in 2 weeks' time, the 4th and 5th of June, at the Paul Ricard circuit in the south of France. Very different challenge, of course, in Paul Ricard, but nonetheless a very enjoyable one. Another high-speed circuit on the almost lunar landscape in Provence. Well, Tony Wells and James Littlejohn have had a fine weekend. As Tony Wells heads towards the checkered flag, he swings through Blanchimont for the final time and is about to head to the checkered flag. It's going to be a third victory of the season for Tony Wells and James Littlejohn in the Radical European Masters. Wells swings through the bus stop chicane, accelerates out and takes the checkered flag. Victory at Spa-Francorchamps for Tony Wells and James Littlejohn in the Radical European Masters. Second place to Manhal Alos and Alex Kapadia, and Kapadia getting to within 7 seconds of Wells at the flag, and third, and within the Supersport class, Marcello Marottiotto and Marco Ciencetti. Marottiotto giving a huge thumbs up on the pit wall to Ciencetti in front of us. Johan Scheer and Alain Costa are going to take 4th position, so we wait for them to come through. We are going to be closing our broadcast as the last couple of cars come across the line, so good chance to say thank you very much for joining us this weekend here in Spa. Really enjoyed talking you through 3 excellent races from the Radical European Masters. So from Will Brown and Ben Evans, we'll see you in 2 weeks' time in Paul Ricard.